Our next speaker's tagline is Make, Fix, Help. And through her work, she does just that. Juliana Rotich is a technologist, entrepreneur, consultant, strategic advisor, speaker, and much, much more. She is the co-founder of BRCK, a Kenya-based hardware and software company helping to make internet connectivity possible in areas with infrastructure challenges like frequent power outages and inconsistent connectivity. Juliana also co-founded Ushahidi, a nonprofit company specializing in open source software that connects people and information and changes how information flows in the world. Juliana serves on advisory councils of numerous startups and multinational companies. She is amazing. We are thrilled to have Juliana here with us today. Her work embodies this year's theme of connecting worlds, be it through the software or hardware she's helped develop or her consulting or advisory works. She connects people and worlds to communicate and collaborate. Her work also strongly aligns with PTC's nonprofit vision and mission to use the power of ICT to improve quality of life. And while much of her work has focused on Africa, the implications of her work are far-reaching and offer many lessons and opportunities for the Pacific Rim. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Juliana Rotich.
Hello, everyone. Or actually more like aloha. So it is truly an honor and a pleasure for me to join you today. I am a person from the edge. And by the edge, most people think of Africa as the edge of the world. Africa's population and economy is growing. And if I can share a few stories that hopefully we can learn from some of the trends and some of the work that I've been doing over the last 10 years. I'd like for you to take down take a piece of paper and think of a location, a place. It can be a remote area. It doesn't have to be. It can be a place that you go back to. It can be a place where you were born or a place where you lived. Just think of that particular location. And as you think of that place, I'd like you to think about the community or the people that you met there. I'd like for you to think about who did you connect with? Did you connect with a young person, a child, or an old person who maybe told you a story or two? So keep that in mind, and we will have a quick conversation at the end of this. So if you could just take a quick moment and actually just write that down. A place, a community, and who in that community needs help. So I thought about this presentation in terms of, these are just stories in terms of scratching the surface. There's more that needs to be done. I'm not going to go too deep into all the work that has happened, but the point is, if you look at the background map of Africa, this is, when we think about the Renaissance, right? There's the Sahara Desert that created quite a bit of a barrier between Africa connecting with the rest of the world. And Africa's next vanguard is dependent on advancement on many fronts, as is the future of the world. And there was a connection between all the various continents with ships that really shaped a lot of what we think about, the way information flowed, the way people flowed around the world. And I'm here to share some stories on what we can learn from the growth of the ICTs on the African continent. Before I do that, how many of you have seen this image about the true size of Africa? Amazing. So just to mention that a few of the stories that I'm sharing are from a sliver of this incredibly amazing continent that is so massive that you could fit the United States into the western part of Africa. You could fit most of Europe into Africa. You could fit India, you could fit Japan, and you could fit China, just to give you a quick view of the relative size of the continent. During one of the expeditions that I did with my colleagues at BRCK a few years ago, we went from the middle part, which is Kenya, all the way down by road into South Africa. And the biggest takeaway from that was not only is Africa expansive in terms of landmass, but also expansive in terms of its opportunities. Now, let me take you back to 2008. That's 10 years ago. This is a picture that I took at my uncle's farm. And what was happening is I had gone back home for the holidays, and there was an election in at the end of 2007. It did not go well. And sadly, we lost more than 1,200 people because of post-election violence. And the question that I and the co-founders of Ushahidi, Ori, Eric, and David asked ourselves is, what if we could do something to use technology in the face of post-election violence in Kenya? So this is how a not-for-profit tech company started 10 years ago. When you think about that place when we began this, it takes an event that directly affects you to go over and beyond to act. Let me explain this a little bit further. Let's say you had a huge pothole in your neighborhood that scraped the bottom of your car every time you go over it. It gets your head bumped every time the van you're in goes over it. When local authorities decide to fix this pothole, that event genuinely moves you and is news in your world. So if you think about those communities and the place that is closest to you, what are the issues or news that you would care if it was fixed? And this idea around this pothole theory, if there's a pothole in far away, it would be less exciting to you. And one of these theories is what helped to inform our work at Ushahidi. This was the first map that we put together, and this happened within 4 days. After a few emails going back and forth, including with our advisor at the time, Ethan Zuckerman, who's currently the head of the Center for Civic Media at MIT, we put together a quick mashup. And the idea was to, what if we could crowdsource and figure out what was going on where in the country? Since I was in the rural part of Kenya, I mentioned to my colleagues that, hey, first of all, where I am right now, I'm using a Motorola Q. I don't know if some of you remember that old phone, but I liked it because it had big buttons and I could play Bubble Breaker. But where I was only on an edge connection, and it was very difficult for me to communicate with my team. And I asked them, hey, why don't we put together a shortcode? And they added that into the map, and within 4 or 5 days, we got more than 300 reports from all around Kenya. And that this was a collaborative effort. It was not, we sat down and said, oh, you know, we're going to put together a grant proposal, or we just wanted to change how information was flowing at the time, because when there's a crisis, you want information. You want information from people who can tell you about what is going on that is relevant to the pothole that you see outside of your yard. And at that particular time, live media broadcasts were banned. So the only way we could get a clearer view of what was going on in the country was to go on blogs or to find sources online, because that particular channel was not it was not banned, so you could still find information online. And this idea was, this is not a fancy piece of technology, because at the time there were a lot of people using mashups. And it's a mix. It's neither high-tech nor is it low-tech. It's mixed tech. And the idea is that you can create a platform that can serve people. However, if you have internet access, you could find information on the map. If you did not, you could find information via SMS. So that was the beginning of that. And the company grew. And one of the things that was a value that we held on was this idea of community. It takes a team and a community to build this, from a team of 4 to a team, at the height of it, we were a team of 30. And Ushahidi now is poised to do more in the world. And what started is, we started without experience in open source. I was from the telecom industry, as most of you are. I actually worked for Sprint Telecom when I was putting myself through college in Kansas City. And I also did a telecom technician certificate in a community college. And I was astounded and amazed by the power of the internet. I remember one of my jobs, I worked at a data center as a technician, just basically switching out servers and making sure that the data center was working well. And one of the things that I miss until now is the connectivity of using a T1 line, where a web page just pulls up as if it's magic. And the work that you do in setting up infrastructure and the partnerships around the world is truly amazing work. And when we built that team, one of the things that kept us together was this mission of helping people to use platforms so that they can build on it. When we started, the platform was only available in English. In less than 6 months, when we changed the platform to be open source, it was translated into Spanish before it was translated into Swahili. That's the power of this idea of platform thinking. And some of the organizations and partnerships that helped us get going were Pierre Omidyar of Omidyar Networks, and also a few other foundations like MacArthur Foundation and Ford Foundation. But before that, at least we had a platform that we could say, this is how you could plug in. My co-founder, David, who we later put together BRCK, he said, since you have this platform and people are using it actively in their communities, and he described it that the growth that you experience and the things that you have to keep in mind as the code base grows, the team grows, and it felt like you were fixing a plane while it was flying. So you're piloting it and you're still fixing things as you're going. So that's just how it felt like. Now let me take you to 2010. That's 8 years ago. And one of the use cases for Ushahidi that really helped us grow was the Haiti earthquake. When the Haiti earthquake happened, there was a great need to crowdsource information and to provide the US Southern Command with information so that when they were going out in the field, they knew what they needed to carry with them. And also, when in 2011, when there was a tsunami in Japan, we worked with Amazon Japan and a lot of the volunteers and the wonderful people who worked with us to put together Sinsai.info. Actually, they put it together. What we did was we helped them with customizing the platform. So we asked them, hey, how can we help? At that time, it was very difficult to find information about where are the radiation centers. If you Googled for that information was not organized in a way that was useful. What you needed was to tap into the collective intelligence because it was a fast-moving situation. There's also other organizations that came up around that time that used the idea of crowdsourcing. And they said, we need the platform to work in Japanese. You have 3 Kenyans, 1 American. None of us know how to speak or write Japanese. So we said, look, if we think about opening this up and asking people to help us, and we put the strings of the information that we need into a Google Doc, and we told everyone, hey, are you bilingual? Hop in, help us to translate. Within 48 hours, the team in Japan had a fully translated platform. They took it, they were able to use it, and it provided information even to local entities. The idea is that we can reinforce and not replace what is happening on the ground. That led to the platform and the community spanning more than 150 countries, and the platform being translated into more than 40 languages. That is a few more languages than the BBC is available. So I'm very proud of that. And openness is not dangerous. It can teach us a lot. The power of openness, it invites people to make our platforms their own so that they can solve the problems closest to themselves. This is what the platform looks like now. It was recently used for the elections in Kenya and then also for the elections in 2016 in the US. We worked with various organizations in the US that helped deal with reports of voter suppression in various parts of the US. And the idea is that this information was put together and provided to people who could do something about it and could send out teams of lawyers to help people on the ground who are facing voter suppression. The idea is this: from a platform perspective, libraries were built before people could read, and libraries drove the demand for literacy. They were built to help citizens become literate. It therefore makes sense that data and platforms exist before people become literate in how to use data. And to make it easier for them to help understand this data, Ushahidi's role is to help to provide that framework of accessing the data, digesting the data, and to drive the demand for open data. But without people to make use of this data or to help provide context, our farms cannot flourish. Usually local people understand the issues that they're dealing with best. We need this wisdom. In this information age, ordinary citizens should no longer be considered passive recipients of information, but active participants instead. So when we began this, I asked you about a place, a community, and the people who needed the help. The idea here is that you can work with those people to drive how you create solutions. So 10 years ago, connectivity in Kenya was 8%. And I just want to highlight a few trends before I end. And one of those things that has happened over the last 8 years, more than 10 years, is that Africa's mobile growth has been astounding. It's been just this curve that keeps going. And there's still more growth to be had in Africa when it comes to mobile subscriber growth. And you've had also decreasing cost of devices and increased adoption. So that continues to help drive growth in Africa. And these are based on GSM numbers on mobile phone adoption. There's more to be done. And when we think about a bedrock for connectivity, this is a map of the undersea fiber optic cables that connect Africa to the rest of the world. What I find amazing is that Africa, it's transcending that geographical problem that I mentioned when I began. When I talked about the Sahara, dividing Africa and not, Africa not being really part of the global conversation, that conversation is changing. Something that I'd like to point out with this map is that it traces those transatlantic sea routes, right? So while there's a lot of connectivity and it is quite welcome, there's still more that needs to be done to connect within the continent. And considering how massive it is, that is such a big opportunity. And there are companies like Liquid Telecom and many others, and Seacom Cables and others that are doing a lot of work to connect the continent within. That is a really big opportunity. But how things were is not how things are right now. That accessibility, that internet, has enabled us to change the way we connect and how we do business with the rest of the world. The story of Africa has changed, and this is the new geography. It still mirrors the old geography, yes, but this geography is one that I am extremely excited about, and some of the companies here have had a hand in that. What happens after you have connectivity? In Kenya, at around 2010, we were able to have fiber optic connectivity. And one of the questions that one of the things we realized is that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. The fact that we had massive connectivity, it became a really exciting place. So even if I had my Motorola Q at the time, pages would have loaded a bit faster, unlike previously when we started. And after Ushahidi became an anchor company that set up the iHub in Nairobi. We wondered what it would be like if there was a space where designers, engineers, coders, makers, and dreamers could come together and connect with each other and around the world. So it became the beginning of the startup tech ecosystem. An ecosystem that was previously there. It was quite disparate, with people working in big companies, but they felt quite alone. They didn't have a place where they could come together. So the iHub became this place, and over time we had more than 16,000 members, more than 150 startups of varying levels of success, but still, there's a growing space of technology, and the story of Africa and the story of Kenya has therefore changed from a place where it was just, most people really didn't think much of Kenya. Around 2008, it was just a place where there was violence. But then now, the story of technology in Africa has also changed to a place of really big opportunity and incredible talent. Now, the talent in Africa is there, and spaces like the iHub have sprung up around the continent. From a World Bank report, there were 90 such locations around Africa, from Addis all the way to South Africa, and it's providing a new and exciting system of locations where you can connect with these designers, with coders, and people who are creating companies that I hope will shape the future. Now, connectivity in Kenya, including mobile broadband, is at 88%. It's such an encouraging story, and there's more to be done still. I will also tell you another story of a company that is helping to shape the future in Kenya, and this is Safaricom. It is another anchor company that started Actually, it started a while ago, but one of the most successful stories of Safaricom is the M-Pesa story. There was 70,000 users in 2007, and there are now 23 million users of M-Pesa in 2016. These are more users of M-Pesa than there are Zambians in Zambia. And more than 42% of Kenya's GDP is transacted via M-Pesa. But one of the things that I'd like to point out about M-Pesa and this particular platform, the company is acting more as a platform now, because it's providing a system that provides a way to send money easily from one person to the other. And it utilizes this idea that you can have a distribution model. So this is an M-Pesa location where someone can go deposit money into their mobile phone, and it helps to power the sachet economy. And this is the economy where we may not think of it as very valuable, but It's extremely valuable when people can buy just small amounts of what it is they need, be it small denominations of airtime or small packages of margarine or small packages of detergent. It's a massive, massive economy. This distribution model is very important, and it's been leveraged by companies like Equity Bank from a small scale into growing into really spectacular big companies. The lesson is to serve people as close to where they are as possible, to listen, to see the need, and to provide the infrastructure for them to be able to be served wherever they are. This model has gone beyond Kenya. Just a few weeks ago, a story ran in Financial Times about Michael Joseph, who was once the CEO of Safaricom, taking the charge of expanding mobile money in Europe. M-Pesa continues to be an incredible example of growth. More so, it's also an example of a company that looks at values. One of the things that Safaricom is also a big leader around is this idea of looking at sustainable development goals and how they can play a role in transforming lives. And there's a recent MIT study that has shown Safaricom has helped more than 250,000 Kenyans to rise out of the poverty line. It is truly an encouraging story of how platforms can help to change people's lives. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is the various opportunities that exist. And currently, when you look at 600 million Africans lacking access to electricity, while this is regrettable, it's also a really big opportunity. And the grid is still a very important part of how we need to think about the future. Just as we can learn from the advent of the internet and distributed centralized systems, there's an opportunity to look at what can be done to build grids of the future that can also be decentralized. A company that is helping to change the story is M-Kopa Solar in Kenya, started by Jesse Moore and others. And the idea here is that it's a new model for powering Africa. It encourages people to buy kits of solar kits that they pay for over time, reducing the upfront cost that they would have in order to own a solar panel on their roof that can help to power a mobile phone, that can help to power a TV and a radio. And there's also another company called Paygo Solar that is providing solar home systems, and digital payments are enabling new business models in Africa. That's also something to learn from these edge cases, that it provides these new models, the pay-as-you-go models, to help to service those edge companies. This is Lucy Sakuda from Masai. She is in one of those remote areas, and she's able to have light without having to use kerosene lamps. And this makes a really big difference in her health and the health of her children, who are not breathing in toxic fumes. It really does change lives. Just really quickly, back to the story of connectivity. One of the questions that we looked at is, why do we use technology designed for London and LA when we live in Nairobi and New Delhi? And one of the things that has become so important in how we think about these questions is the internet is just a utility. It's such a big part of our lives. And one of the big opportunities that continues to be the case in Africa is that much of it is still not connected. Like I mentioned, the connectivity is mostly on the outside. We still have issues with connectivity on the inside of Africa. I took this picture in Samburu when we had a project out to connect with those communities in a very rural part of Kenya. Around that time, around 2012, we came up with the idea of a company called BRCK. And the idea was to provide connectivity for people and things. And this was in response to our frustration with the grid connectivity disconnecting just when we needed to stay connected with the rest of our colleagues around the world. And we wondered, what would it be like if the Ushahidi office in Nairobi had technology designed for its unique needs? What we needed was resilient technology in the face of power blackouts. So we made BRCK. A router that also has battery power, which can be charged and provide resilient connectivity. And as we did this, we learned that we needed a bottom-up strategy. We needed to do human-centered design, and we needed to really look into the local market presence and to tap into their knowledge and to tap into those networks. These are pictures of my colleagues doing studies with motorcycle taxi riders, with small shops, to figure out how can we create a model to provide internet access that was useful, resilient, and affordable. That work continues. With flexible capital and bridging expertise with transnational collaboration, BRCK has been able to continue doing that work. And even if I'm not involved in the day-to-day, that team continues to be engaged in providing new models of providing access to information around Kenya. One of the questions that BRCK is trying to figure out is how can it provide access to content and the internet to from 100 users to more than 1 million just in Kenya. So it's a continuing level of work that is engaged with a team based in Nairobi, but with collaborations with various companies around the world. Like I mentioned, one of the things that was really encouraging about Safaricom was the fact that they look at the Sustainable Development Goals as outlined by the United Nations as an opportunity to think of what can ICT companies do to have an effect on the various goals. And there are many challenges to tackle, from education to electricity, to partnerships for engagement. There are lots of challenges. And Dr. Kitui, when he mentioned this, and I wanted to just pass along that, is if we figure out how innovation can help us to solve problems in Africa and actually meet some of those SDGs, that Africa can help us to show us, can help to show the way forward of how that can happen. Now let's think about education. Around 2015, BRCK was asking, there's a big opportunity because by 2050, there will be more than 800 million school-going Africans. And it is a big opportunity, but also slightly scary, because when we look at the current education systems, how can they be enabled using technology? And this is not just a Kenyan problem, so let's watch really quickly.
At BRCK, we truly understand the challenges of digital education in Africa. Just having devices or getting connectivity won't solve the education gap. We have to look at the bigger picture of delivering a sustainable platform for education. So we took what we had learned from working with Kenyan schools. We took the rugged products that we had been building at BRCK, and we put them together into the first fully integrated education platform designed in Africa for Africa. We introduced the Kit. The Kit combines the connectivity of the BRCK, the server and content capacity of the BRCK Pi, and 40 of our Africanized Kio tablets into a simple, integrated platform that instantly turns any schoolroom into a digital classroom. The entire solution fits into a secure, rugged, and weather-resistant case. To keep the setup simple, the Kit only has one cable, its power cord. Because the classroom experience is so important to us, we designed the entire platform to be turned on and off from a single button. The Kit revolutionizes the very idea of having technology in the African classroom. We don't just think about these ideas in our Nairobi lab. We spend a lot of time in classrooms across Kenya, observing, experimenting, and getting valuable feedback from both the teachers and the students. One lesson we learned from our earlier design iterations is that the tablet charging connection is the greatest single point of failure for devices used by children. So we engineered the Kio not to require a cable for charging. The Kio kit includes the first practical use of wireless charging for education tablets, where the student simply drops their Kio into the kit and it begins charging. Another thing we observed in the classrooms was the teacher's challenge in describing how to put on the headphones correctly. So we color coordinated the earpieces to make giving instructions even easier. A common issue faced by schools in Africa is power interruptions. Once charged, the Kios and the entire kit can run through a typical 8-hour school day. In off-grid environments, you can even run the entire system using solar. The Kio kit stores all the educational content on it, so that you don't need to be connected to the internet or power for it to work. This means a school child in Turkana can get the same access to learning as a child in Nairobi. BRCK is committed to leveling the education playing field in Africa. The Kio kit is what happens when Africans design a solution for African schools.
Now, let's go back to that question that I asked you when we began. Think of that location that you would like to pick. It doesn't have to be remote. If it is, sure. If you do not have one, I invite you to join me. Let me take you to a place called Lokito Engaber in northern Kenya. There's an organization called Learning Lions that teaches young people how to be entrepreneurial, how to be graphic designers, how to code, how to do 3D modeling. And this is one of the driest, most remote areas of Kenya. But this is also a place that I realized can teach us a lot about our strategy. So in 2016, I had gone up to Lokito Engaber with Ludwig Bayern, who had been supporting a local school. And this is a school that started with just a teacher under a tree, right? And with Ludwig and a few of his friends, he crowdsourced and brought together some money to help create a structure for the students. This is a picture that was taken where we had people from the community and some of the students, and we're still fundraising to get some kits to that particular school. And when we were going up to Kalakol, this is where Lokito Engaber School is, some of the students that came with us were Isaiah and Enomat. Isaiah and Enomat are students at Learning Lions. And the model is that they would get basic free ICT training, but they would get into a model where there's also startup lions. So when you graduate from Learning Lions, you can go from there into creating your own startup. Isaiah won a hackathon where he created a website within 24 hours. And this is a website for the local church that had some property. And I'm reminded that when we think about our strategies of who we reach out to provide opportunities, not only do we need to provide the basic free ICT education, but we also need to think about the pipeline. So in 2016, after I met them during their graduation, I was so amazed by what they were able to do and was really excited when in 2017, just a few months ago, I was working with Airbus, consulting with them on this very question of what happens, which startups are doing interesting things or could do interesting things in the space of using UAVs, drones, 3D printing, or smart sensors. So that was one question that really we wanted to figure out. Airbus has incubators in Europe and also in India. And they wanted to figure out, would it make sense to have an incubator in Africa, perhaps in Nairobi or in South Africa? So the company that I was working with at the time, Novato Africa, and I told them, look, we cannot answer this question just by running the competition from Nairobi. We have to go out all the way up north to various places and engage with those communities and ask them what startups they have, what solutions that they have that can help to change their communities. Isaiah and Enomat came up with the idea of helper drones. And these are drones to help provide medicine to rural pastoralist communities. They're still working on this. And they came and pitched against many other startups from Ethiopia, from Tanzania, from Uganda, from other parts of East Africa. And this was one of their first trips back into, they had not left Turkana. I mention this story because the idea that you can innovate from the edge, right? You can reach out to people that you would consider out in the middle of nowhere. Provide the basic access, but then also do not relent and continue to provide opportunities for them to plug into your work so that they can continue to be part of the story of how they can change those local communities. This is a picture from the final Airbus BizLab competition, and some of the teams came all the way from Mombasa, and one of them was a 17-year-old who came up with a submersible drone idea. And there's another woman who led a team that were creating drones and testing them near Mount Kenya. And one of the most amazing things that happened was as she was pitching, as her team was pitching, she had a gentleman that was with her. And whenever the judges would have a tough question, you would see the gentleman go, Hazel. He would keep referring to her to answer the tough questions. So I mention these stories just to underscore that we cannot assume that the solutions and the partnerships that can drive the future are the current ones that we have now. The invitation to you is to look at where are the partners that are out on the edge that you should be working with, to define, to work with them, to figure out what are the local needs, and what role can you play as an individual, as a company, and as a vector for how we can truly leverage the power of networks. Because if there's anyone who understands decentralized network systems, it's the people in this room. If there's anyone who understands the power of connectivity and the power of the internet, it is you. It is you who is in this room. And now I'd like to ask you to look up that piece of paper that I asked you to write down in the beginning. I'd like you to think about how you can innovate at the edge and bridge that to the core. So think of that place. Think of ways that you can innovate in the place that I asked you to think about in the beginning. With whom can you innovate with? Could that be a local ISP? Could that be a local startup? Could that be a local not-for-profit? And for whom? Is it for young people, for old people, for children? Is it for education? Even though most companies here are for-profit companies, you can be a vector for incredible change in the world. And if you'd like to join me, when we started this presentation and you do not have a place, I'd like you to join me to innovate in Turkana with Learning Lions for young people and for the youths of Kenya. Thank you so much for your kind attention. And I'd like to, I think we may do we have time for quick questions? If I think we have maybe 4 minutes. Okay. That's all right. So just really quickly, thank you so much for your kind attention, and I'm very open to, if you have any further questions, I'll be around, and please come up to me, and I'm happy to work with you. And thank you so much to PTC for the invitation to join you. And incidentally, I am also 40 years old, so congratulations on your 40th anniversary. I am truly honored to join you here today, and I wish you meaning in the important work that you all do in various parts of the world. And for PTC, thank you.